Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to SafeDefend Live. I'm with Dr. Greg Vecchi. I'm Dave Evans. We're here to talk to you about temporary versus substantive threats. And Doc, I'm just going to be honest with you, not sure I understand what we're talking about today, but I can't wait to learn from you so I have more knowledge and I can help other people survive the unexpected.
Well, it's actually very simple. Especially when we're talking about school threat assessment, but it kind of applies across the board. There's always that problem in being accurate. What try to avoid is trying to assess someone as being going to be violent and they're not, or that they're not going to be violent and they are, right? And so it's these false negatives, false positive. It's kind of the Achilles heel of threat assessment. And people follow their kind of their gut or what they think might be going on instead of just looking at the facts and letting the facts make a decision for you, right? And that's kind of what I want to try to navigate here a little bit, because we always hear threats, especially in schools, right? You have kids who they threaten each other all the time, and very rarely does it involve any sort of violence, let alone any sort of homicide or serious types of violence. And so, as far as just really just kind of just quick hacks that you can incorporate as a teacher, as a principal, as administrator, or even in a workplace environment, through HR or whoever you have that's looking out for the workplace violence stuff, is go beyond just the types of threats which we hear about, right? So we always hear about direct threats. That's the most common one. Someone says, "I'm going to kill you," right? That's a direct threat. It's very clear. um, More of an indirect threat might be you overhear somebody saying, "I'm going to kill him," right? Or it might even be a little bit more uncertain, like, "You better watch out." And that, just go, "Well, what do you mean by you?" Right? We're not really sure. Or even more veiled, like, "You might not want to come to school on Monday." you know and then more of conditional ones. These are fairly easy to figure out, and these are ones that, "If you do that again, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to beat you up," things like that. And so these are, there's various types of threats, and so we have to look at them in terms of direct and indirect and implied, veiled, conditional. These are pretty basic stuff. But even if you understand those threats, the question is, do they really mean it? And so there are really two types of threats that you got to kind of figure out, right, when you first sense or get reports that someone is doing some sort of threatening communication. And again, it could be verbal, like I just explained here. It might be through gestures. It might be through writing. It might be on social media, whatever it is. So the question is, you got a concerning statement or a concerning situation, and the next step is that we don't want to overreact or underreact. And that's kind of the purpose of my of talking today a little bit, is that really try to evaluate this threat. Did they have a lasting intent? In other words, is the threat real or not? Are they making a
Yep.
threat versus posing a threat? That's really the important thing. And really, it's fairly simple. The first thing we always want to do, especially with kids, because kids have uh, less coping mechanisms, than most adults do, simply because they have less of life experience, right? They haven't experienced life and all the horrible things that are going to happen to them, right? But once you experience, failure and breakups and all the stuff that happens to all of us throughout our life, you get a little bit thicker skin and you get a little bit better coping with it.
Yep.
So this especially is has to do with kids. Kids will say stuff and they don't mean it, and so that's what we want to know: did he mean it or did he not? And essentially, that's where it comes down to temporary versus a substantive threat. Is it real or is it not? And a really quick way to immediately determine kind of where we are in terms of the seriousness of it is that, you ask the question, was this threat just an expression of humor, of rhetoric, of frustration, or just the kid was angry, right? And in the moment, he said something that was concerning, or even did, I think there's a recent news thing going on where some kid was I think expelled for doing the finger gun thing, right? Stuff like that, right? And you got to kind of stop and say, okay, look, you can't jump to conclusions on that. And so essentially, we're trying to figure out, was this real or not? And a really simple thing to do. And it's so simple. It's just like when you see someone in crisis, you go up there and you sit down and you try to resolve that crisis, that grievance, right? It's just as simple as that. If you have a concerning kid, right, a concerning employee, and they have said something that might be threatening, well, first of all, you do have to address it. The best thing to do is go sit down and talk with them, or get enough information before you sit down and talk with them so you can determine if they're lying to you or not. You want to ask questions you already know the answer to, obviously.
Yep.
And you want to sit down and say, was it, what were you doing? You said this. You point out, you give the evidence that what was said or what was done or what was written down or what was said on social media, and you say, what did you mean by that? And essentially, if the person apologizes or provides a reasonable explanation, like, what, I was really angry because we lost a football game and the guy was, making fun of our team and things like this, and I got, angry, and so I said, what, I'm gonna, if you don't knock it off, I'm gonna beat your butt, right? Or I'm gonna kill you, or whatever was said, right? If you get an apology, if you get a reasonable explanation, then you can pretty much just kind of relax a little bit and say, okay, that was a temporary threat. The question we're trying to ask is there a lasting intent to harm someone or harm something? And the answer is no, it's temporary, and your threat assessment is pretty much over. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't keep an eye on the kid necessarily. Certainly might want to monitor to make sure that it is what it is. But that's kind of an easy hack. When you're talking about a substantive threat, all that means is that it's either serious or possibly deadly. And a serious threat would be like fighting, right? Punching, hitting, things like this. When you start to hear threats to kill, to rape, to cause grave bodily injury, or the use of weapons, that becomes deadly. But either way, it doesn't really matter. The process is the same. We're no longer dealing with a temporary threat. We're looking at something that there is a lasting intent. So, for example, let's say the kid said something and you go on there and you can't get a good explanation, or what he says doesn't make sense, or he just simply says, you know what, no, I did really mean that. Okay, well, now we have basically assessed it as no more of a temporary threat. We're dealing with something substantive. So now we got to really deal with the kid. And now we are, on this pathway stuff. And now we really start, using our interventions. A couple, just before I finish here, just a couple things, some presumptive indicators that a threat is real. When you have these indicators, you're most likely dealing with a real threat. Okay. For example, very specific and plausible details that indicates thought and planning, and that they really are serious. If it's been repeated over and over again or told to multiple people, if anything is expressed as a violent plan, if they try to seek help or accomplices, they try to recruit an audience, or there's any physical evidence of an intent to carry out a threat, then we basically take that as serious, as substantive, and we go ahead and do what we need to do for interventions. And that's really it. There's just always this, this sense that, oh my God, he's going to be violent because he said, I'm going to kill you. Well, you need to step back and first off, try to resolve this temporary. And almost always you can, especially with kids. When you can't is when you then move into the threat intervention piece. So.
Yeah, I think we overreact a lot of times. I think
Yep.
today's society more than ever, we've stopped having those conversations with people when something goes wrong. We
Yep.
immediately go to, you did pistols firing. I mean, Oklahoma State University and Texas Tech, their students are doing this all the time. So we can
Yeah.
expel all of them. No, that's not reasonable, right? If the kid was being a jackwagon, tell them they can't do that. Have a conversation, put them in detention for a day. But let's be adults and levy, adulting with being a child and how you react to children when they do things. Because the thing that scares me the most about all of this is social media, right?
Yeah.
So Sally or Johnny does something at school because they were angry, and now the school does something, they overreact, And now it's all over social media. And now this kid is labeled and bullied and harassed because they behaved a certain way. I mean, people don't understand that the power, the change in the way communication happens and how quickly things can get out of hand. So it's up to us
Yeah.
as adults to go, no, stop. We took care of it. Everything's okay. We got this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a really good point. The other thing is unnecessarily losing contact with the kid. If you expel the kid as just a reaction and not really necessary, right? Then you lose contact with that kid. So not only has he did what you just suggested, which was label this kid as a problem and probably make what wasn't going to be violent possibly violent now, because now he feels labeled. He feels, he's grieved, and now they kicked him out of school, and you're just adding, and it keeps us or threat assessors or the teachers and everybody from just keeping
Yep.
tabs on the kid. Keeping tabs on the kid is the basis of threat assessment. If you lose contact with the kid, then you lose contact with the ability to assess behaviors.
Yeah, we got to stop pressing the easy button, saying we're kicking them out, they're done. We got to go back to adulting like they did when we were children. When I was a child, we misbehaved. We got to see the headmaster, principal, and appropriate action was taken. I think we've lost sight of that. So I think it's important for us as adults to be adults and to show grace and to listen to people. And if it's a real threat, it's a real threat. We deal with it. But most of the time, it's probably not. And we can probably mitigate any risk by doing the right thing, having a conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
All right, Doc. Well, it's Labor Day weekend, so if you have a nice weekend, have a lot of fun, and enjoy your family. Great seeing you again.
Great seeing you guys. Have a good weekend.
All right, so that Doc and Dave, we are out of here.